Hey, what's up guys? JB here. So we are getting a new Halloween unit this week, and we're actually getting it at the same time as the Japanese side. They are actually just a couple of days ahead of us on this one. I'm sure most of you have already seen in the news, but we are getting Halloween Lucia. I have a lot of fond memories of the Win version of this character. She was one of the first units released in the game that actually had defense penetration and really introduced that mechanic in the game, which was definitely very much needed to cut through all the Engelbert Ayaka duos out there at the time. The Halloween version though of Lucia is completely different, and she has a brand new magic-based job called Grimoire Keeper, and she's coming in as a 70 cost dark unit. Now that 70 cost always carries the potential to really amp up the power of your limited cost teams, but it's definitely not always a guarantee. So let's dive into her kit today and let's see what she's going to bring to the table. So as mentioned, Lucia is going to be a 70 cost dark unit. She has a movement of 3 and a jump of 1, and as expected for most mage units out there, she is able to wear hats and cloth. Now looking first at her TMR, probably one of the more interesting TMRs that we've seen in quite a while, and something that I was actually posting about on my community page. This is a game-changing TMR for PvE events like Trials of Reckoning or Guild Raids. Now it may not be used in each and every one of those winning strategies, but I think that there are going to be quite a few situations where this will be a way that you can increase your damage. Now moving down into Lucia's stats, and I have enhanced this view to include even more statistics than ever before, and I'll now be including both crit and crit evasion here. I think that there has been a noticeable direction for the game, over the past year or so to really put a lot more focus into the crit mechanic. So I did think it was useful to show these values here to kind of get an idea, whether the units we look at are going to be suitable for those kind of crit style builds, or even some of the equipment that's been introduced to leverage it. Now with crit and crit evade, similar to accuracy and evade, I am including any relevant passive abilities there when I am factoring in these totals, so definitely keep that in mind. All right, let's start with the good here for Lucia. HP is going to be a definite strength for her. She is coming in at an above average value for her base HP total. And when it comes to her innate total, I'm going to say for a mage unit, it is actually a pretty good total as well. It's definitely more rare that we see mages, above that 3500 HP threshold, especially when they also have access to an HP passive, like Lucia does, and we'll actually look at that here in a few minutes. Now her innate magic value is also pretty good. It's coming in at that 536 value. And she does actually have access to magic up passives as well, so she can bring that up even higher if you want to. So she's not really going to be a top tier, 1700 magic style unit, but in most builds I was playing around with, she's in the high 1300s or low 1400s, which I think is actually very serviceable. Now when it comes to the rest of the stats here, that is kind of where the buck stops, very average or below average in pretty much every other category here. That dex especially is in the bottom tier of the game. And so as dex goes, so is your crit going to go as well. So this will definitely not be a reliable crit unit whatsoever, and her accuracy will definitely suffer there as well. And unfortunately, she doesn't have any passives that are going to be able to boost up that accuracy and that innate total any higher. So really, she is just sitting right at a below average there, when it comes to her innate accuracy. Now moving on into Lucia's mastery here, this is actually a pretty basic one. She is actually picking up 10 area resist there, which I always like, and that will definitely allow her to stack up her area resist to a pretty nice total. On the defensive front, we're looking at 10 defense and 0 spirit here innately. I definitely like to see that base defense there, that's a pretty nice starting total. Adding to that, she does have some pretty decent resists here, especially that 10% to pierce and 15% to missile. Now outside of those, she doesn't really have any major weaknesses here when we're looking at the other damage type resistances, so that is actually pretty nice as well. And notably here, she is picking up 50% stop resistance, and that is definitely nice to have there as well when we think about all of the Dark Finas and Agriuses out there on the battlefield. Alright, moving into passive abilities and counters here next, and overall we have some pretty good passives, at Lucia's beck and call. Her first passive is going to be from her new Grimoire Keeper job. That is the one I think that you'll have turned on, in pretty much all situations. It is actually her only source anywhere in her kit for spirit penetration, and she's picking up 40 there. Now this one does come along with 12 defense on top of that, so that's going to bring her up to 22 defense right out of the box, so I do like that as well. And in terms of your actual build, I think you start with that first passive and then you sort of build on that and branch out from there, depending on what you need. I think in most cases, you might be looking at options 3 or 4 here. and that is going to give you some increased bulk with that HP, and then also some additional damage with that magic up. And then that fourth passive is your access to an agility 12%, as well as some additional movement. Now, in terms of autoplay, movement is always kind of a, wait and see what kind of map you're on and are you going to be able to get your buffs off, but it certainly can be useful there, depending on the situation. But certainly for manual play, mobility is definitely always very much sought after, and I do very much like it for that style of play. Now, moving on into the counter abilities here for Lucia, and she is getting a new one that we haven't ever seen before. This is a new one for her Grimoire Keeper job, and this one is going to decrease her hate by 1 when she gets hit, and it will also give her a buff of 40% area resistance as well. So the potential is there, when this triggers, that she could shoot up to around maybe 70 to 80% area resistance, depending on your build. So I definitely could see some nice uses for that one. That is pretty good. And I think I'd actually probably use this one for her in most cases. Her other ones, aren't really all that compelling. The only other one that I'd really think about is the one here from her Black Mage sub. And this is a retaliation base. It has a low chance of going off at just 20%. But, I do like the range on it. It is a range of 3, so maybe some potential uses for that one there as well. All right, let's dive into the main kit here now. And as always, let's start with the buffs. Her self buff, the WoTV calc description on this one is actually kind of a mess. But my understanding of how this skill is going to work is that it's going to grant her the protect status. And as long as that protect status is active on Lucia, she's actually going to have 2 additional effects come along with that. And the first one is going to be that 50% defense debuff resistance. Along with that, she'll get an extra added effect to her attacks, which will decrease the enemy's AP by 20. So pretty nice buff here, adding even further to that sort of physical bulk factor that we were talking about. And I think that AP drain definitely has the potential to be pretty annoying to play against. Now the next one is going to be her party buff. And this one is giving herself and her allies 15 defense as well as 15 area resist. So I think this one is pretty nice too. It's kind of bulking up, not only herself, but her team as well, which is always good. On top of those effects though, it is giving herself a physical barrier. And this is not going to be your typical, 3-hit type barrier. This one is an HP based one, and it is a whopping 7,500 HP. So effectively that will be almost doubling her hit points, in a completed build, which is very, very strong. So this barrier here, on top of the protect that we just looked at, all of the defense and area resist that she's had access to so far, Lucia is definitely going to spell some trouble for physical damage dealers out there, especially if they do not have access to a barrier break. And to be honest, as of late, we have been seeing a lot of units that have very powerful barriers. So really that kind of utility is becoming an essential one, for PvP. Moving on now into Lucia's attacks, and her first skill here is a range 3 with a range height of 2, and we have a little bit better damage on this one than your average low AP skill. This one is having a 141 mod. It is a single target ability and is going to decrease the target's base attack and magic values by 39%. So this one's okay, nothing groundbreaking on this one. These attack and magic stat breaks, they generally are translating to, roughly a 15 to 20% damage loss from the targets that you happen to hit with them. So definitely nothing to sneeze at, but at the same time, nothing quite amazing there either. Her second skill is a range 3 with a range height of 1, and this one's carrying a medium 165 mod. And as you can see here, it's an AoE line attack. Now prior to the damage hitting, this will seal the counter abilities of any targets that it's hitting, and it is guaranteed to hit anyone because it is a 100% hit ability. I'm definitely always a fan of these kinds of abilities that shut down counters, prior to the damage. There are definitely counter abilities out there that are just game swinging on their own. Things like Astrius's preemptive counter is a good example of that, or the tried and true reflex, that so many units out there have nowadays. Now her third skill is a range of 3 with an additional 2 range on the Air of Effect, and it has a nice range height of 2, then it can get an additional one there on the AoE as well. Now we have a 185% mod here in that large diamond AoE pattern, and this one is coming along with 2 post damage effects. And the first one is going to be that it's going to reduce the defense penetration of the targets by 30. So we've seen this utility on just 2 units thus far. That's been on Summer Lilith and Ramza. That's actually both been pretty recently. But this is definitely the largest AoE pattern that we've seen thus far with this kind of utility, so that alone is going to make it pretty powerful. And again, it is going to really enhance her survivability, when it comes to physical damage. You figure that most damage dealers out there these days, they're sitting somewhere maybe between 60 to 80% defense penetration. So that will definitely represent a significant loss to their damage, when they are going up against high defense targets. Now the second effect here is that this will actually give her a CT bonus, if she gets any killing blows with this attack. And it will be at a value of 20 CT per kill, and that can activate up to 3 times per cast. So CT effects, always very powerful for creating double turn scenarios. She may be able to get up to 40, maybe even 60 CT here in one attack, which is very, very strong. All right, moving on to Lucia's fourth skill here, and there has actually already been announced that there's going to be a change for this skill, only 24 hours after their first release. And initially, this skill was actually applying that toad status prior to the damage hitting. And when you are a toad, besides, not being able to use your normal abilities, you do actually take 50% bonus damage. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the details here, why exactly this was changed, but essentially it does have to do with the AI and the interaction between essentially the AI knowing beforehand, whether that toad was going to land, and that sort of translating also into the suggested abilities, which would affect manual play there as well. Now, they did actually announce what the skill is going to be, tomorrow, once the skill is changed, and I have included that here in the skill description. Now, this one is going to be a range 4 with a range height of 1, and they've said that this is going to be an extra large damage mod. Now, in an in-game sense, an XL mod generally is going to start at around 230 to 240%, but we could even see higher than that on this one. We'll just have to wait until the data drops. Now, similar to that second skill we looked at, this one is also going to reduce the counters of the opponents, so not going to be able to reflex this one. That toad status is still going to be a part of this skill, but now it's just going to be applied after the damage is calculated. They did give the skill another enhancement though, and this one is going to become a 100% hit as well, so that is going to give her access to 2 different 100% hits. And I think, considering the accuracy numbers there we were looking at for Lucia, this is going to help her out considerably. And I think overall, I actually do like this version even better than the original one. I think it's going to be better overall for her kit. Now, one other notable thing about this ability is it is her only non-reflectable attack outside of her limit burst, so it could be very useful in those Celis matchups out there as well. All right, last but not least, we're going to look at her limit burst here. And again, we're going to have a range 4 with the range height of 1. It is a single target ability with that standard 200% limit burst mod. Now, similar to Astrius's limit burst, this will add a follow-up attack before the damage hits, which means as soon as she uses this limit burst, it will be active for 3 turns, and she will start hitting with that follow-up attack right then and there from the limit burst. Now, this skill does get an increased 30% chance to hit on it as well, and it will drain 30% of the damage done. So definitely a pretty solid limit burst here, all around. I think you can imagine, maybe she's made her approach towards the enemy and maybe she's taken a little bit of damage along the way. So using this limit burst, that's going to allow her to top herself off and just sort of increase her sustain even further. So I do actually think this one is pretty nice for her. All right, let's look at Lucia's sub-jobs here next. And her main job sub, I think it's actually a pretty good one. Her first skill here is going to be a very potent heal at that 210 times mark. So that essentially makes it a Curada or Curaga equivalent. Of course, as you can see here, the range on it is pretty limited, but maybe could be useful in a Guild War situation, maybe in between strikes. Now, she does get a pretty nice attack there along with that. This one is coming in at up to a range of 4 on the cross AoE, and it is getting up to an area height there of up to 3. Now, we have a solid 185% mod on this attack, and it does come with one effect. Post damage, it does have a 25% chance to confuse the targets. So this is another status effect that she has access to. Now, she has that toad that we just talked about, and here she has the confuse. And those are definitely a couple of status effects that, I'd say most players aren't really actively, trying to resist, so I think there definitely could be some use for this one. Now, Lucia does get access to the Black Mage sub-job as well. As of today on Global, this is definitely not a good job. Definitely one of the weakest in the game, I would say. Very long cast times and really not a lot of utility in this job. In the future though, probably about 2 or 3 months from now, this job will be getting some enhancements, and Flare in particular will be getting a pretty nice one. It is going to add a barrier break there on top of that very large modifier that it has. So I think that skill is pretty good. It does have a pretty long cast time on it, but there are some things you can do to kind of work around that. The other nice thing about that job is that it does have non-elemental attacks, so could be a good way to fight off maybe some light teams that are trying to stack heavy dark resist against you. Now, as we talked a little bit about earlier, here, she does have the Thief sub-job as well. I think this is a great manual play, for that steel hard access and, also the CT maneuvering with steel time. In autoplay though, I'm really not seeing much use for it. Generally, the AI will only be looking to prioritize steel heart if they're unable to hit the enemy actually with any kind of attack. And as we talked about, Lucia, she does have a couple of guaranteed hits that she has, so I really don't see her getting any use out of this in auto. All right, we do have a brand new vision card that's going to be coming alongside Lucia. And here pictured on the card, we have Halloween Salir front and center. She's popping out of her clothes, looking all grown up, and she just looks absolutely crazy in this picture, and I'm totally here for it. Now, they did say in the JP live stream that she is confirmed to be a future Halloween unit, so maybe something that we can look forward to getting next year. And I do wonder if we're actually going to see that new scythe weapon, come along with her. And that certainly could pave the way for a unit I'd be super stoked about, Grimlord Sakura from FFBE. Now, the first thing to note about this card is that it is a job-based vision card, which we haven't seen yet in Global. So unless they change something drastically, about this card, we will be getting access to that job card system a little bit early. And the jobs that are able to take advantage of this particular card will be axe and spear based jobs, as well as stave and book jobs. Now, the base stats on this card, they're fine, nothing crazy here. I do actually like the 7 base defense on it though. So Lucia, if she's wearing this card, she's going to be able to put up a pretty good amount of defense. The bestowed effect here on this one is bringing 10% area resist, which I really like. So if you're able to stack this along with a 20% area resist, elsewhere in the party, that's going to put her at a base 40% area resist. Now remember, she does have that active buff for an additional 15% that she can have, or that counter ability, which would put it up another 40%. So she has the potential there to be at a potential either 55 or 80%, depending on which buff is active at that time. And that's definitely very, very strong for her. Now, they did announce a limited bestowed ability for Lucia when she's wearing the card, and that is going to be an increase in HP and magic attack. Now, I am forecasting a 10 value for each of those, kind of based on their patterns in the past, but the potential is certainly there that they could be even higher than that. The party abilities on the card are super nice as well. We have 30 magic human killer. That is 5 more than we've seen on any other vision card in the game. And we are getting a party strike resist here of 16% as well. That is a super rare one to find. There aren't very many cards in the game which are giving you that type of resistance. So it actually could be really useful for dealing with all of the snows out there that are running around at the moment. Now, on top of that, it is adding a 20 single target resistance, a much sought after effect for PvP in its own right. We're not actually done with the card here yet though. This card is just stacked literally and figuratively. This is an 80 cost card, meaning it does come with a vision ability. And they really now have settled into this pattern of kind of saving these vision abilities for these holiday releases, which is really just a huge FOMO play in my view, and I'm really not crazy about it. But the vision ability can be used by any staff wielding job. It is a 3-hit chain attack, similar to Exorcists and a gift like no other before it. And in addition to that 3-hit attack, it is decreasing the single target resistance of your target by 30, which is very strong as well. If you're at all interested in guild raids, grab this card here, no question. I really can't overstate enough, how much of a game changer this particular card is, when it comes to that mode. All right, moving on to the next section here, we're going to talk a little bit about limited equipment. And at least on the Japanese side, there was this new book weapon released alongside Lucia. I actually didn't see any news announcements for this item, on the global news releases, but, maybe I miss it, or, maybe they're just planning to release this later down the road. I'm not entirely sure. I did want to look at this one anyway, just because it does come with some effects that are specific for Lucia, and it is actually very powerful for her. And I am going to be highlighting the magic version here. There is an aim version as well, but I don't really think it's worth it. It comes with only 13 base accuracy there, so I think there's much better options if you're going for that style of build. Now, the unconditional passive on this one is a 20% magic resist penetration, which we've not seen on a book weapon as of yet, so that is actually pretty cool. It does actually come with 3 conditional effects on it as well, and they're all for Lucia only. And those are going to be 15 magic attack, 10 human killer, and 50 defense debuff resistance. And that debuff resistance here will stack with that personal buff that we looked at a little bit earlier, and it would put her in a position to resist defense breaks entirely, which is pretty nice. But obviously, you know, that increased 25 damage mod that she would be picking up there between the magic attack and human killer is definitely the star of the show for this item. And I think this item really continues the recent trend that we've seen on the Japanese side of certain units getting access to kind of a best in slot weapon for them, you know, just because of those conditional passives kind of giving them so much power, you know, out of one slot. Now, I really hope that they don't decide to delay this one here for us on global, as we've sort of seen with previous seasonal equipment. You know, we do already have that Summer Jaden Blaster, which I'd say is very similar to this item in that it has some very powerful passives just for Jaden. So I don't really see any particular reason to hold this item back. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Now, I did create a mock build for Lucia, and my build goal this week was really just to maximize the power of that new vision card that we looked at. And one thing that I saw as I was looking over the jobs that could use the card is that Lucia's Dark Elemental sisters in Dark Fina and Lemure can both take advantage of this card. Now, in the past few months, we have seen very nice parties, which included Lemure here, along with Joker and Bold Leela. So what I've done here is I've sort of created the magical version of that. And Dark Fina and Lucia both are going to be relatively tanky mages, and they're going to be relying on that healing and time mage support here from Lemure. Now, looking at the equipment here in the build, I am using that new book that we just talked about. If we don't end up getting this one, you know, I'd probably use maybe the Lunar Tomb on her, but, you know, really any of the books, you know, can fit the situation, you know, depending on what other passives you mix with it in the Trust Stones. Now, adding to that, I do have this Survival Vest here for her armor, and that's just to get a bit of defense and some single target resistance there to kind of mix in with all that area resist that she has. And then for the accessory there, I am using Dark Fina's TMR. That's mainly for the agility there, though I do think actually the effect there with magic resist penetration could be very nice for her, you know, if you happen to have the time to use it. If you don't happen to have this particular TMR, you know, any agility TMR I'd say would work there. Now for an Esper, I am going with Valifor, and I like the combination of missile resistance as well as magic attack that this one brings, but also the skill activation reduction nodes that come along in the Esper board. Although most of Lucia's skills are actually instant cast, she does actually have several that do have a cast time, especially if you are using her Black Mage subjob. But also her low AP sort of finisher skill that we looked at, that one does have a cast time as well, so I think getting up to a 400 cast reduction would sort of put her in a pretty decent spot to be able to 2-tick that particular spell. The reason why I actually bring that up is that this unit actually only starts with 50% of her AP, you know, that's lower than many other mages out there. So AP could definitely become a struggle for her, you know, especially if you're getting into maybe a second strike situation or a second defense situation in Guild Wars. So it could actually be useful for being able to conserve some HP if you're able to finish off some units, you know, with that particular skill rather than using a more expensive instant cast one. Now for the vision cards here, you know, as I said, I am building around that new Halloween vision card. And the nice thing here is I'm able to take advantage of the enhanced effectiveness of those job effects on the card while still building a mono elemental party and getting all of the benefits that come along with that. So here I am bringing the Garvel vision card for that area resist, the Black Rose of the Battlefield card for the agility, and to round out the defense, I do have the 20% HP effect coming in the secondary slot from that Persona 5 vision card. If you didn't happen to grab that particular card, I think Golem, you know, could be a nice substitute. You know, in terms of Lemure, I'm not as concerned in really pumping up her magic, so I think that a more physically focused card, you know, is fine to use on her. So those were the defensive effects, but, you know, in terms of the offensive power, we're not really sacrificing all that much here whatsoever. Remember, we do pick up that 30 magical human killer from the new vision card. And then we're adding to that the Diabolos card as well as Dark Fina's card in there as well for the enhanced magic. Now moving down into the Trust Stones, you know, what I have here is pretty general. I think that this is something that you can roll with as sort of a general, sort of all-purpose type Trust Stone build. I have my standard defensive set here on the left side, and these are the effects that I have settled on for Trust Stones that sort of fit most situations in the game, and you can sort of get good value out of, you know, pretty much no matter what. I am tying all of those effects into an HP set for a bit more added bulk and elemental resistance on top of that. Now on the right side, I have that skill activation Trust Stone, and that's going to get me to that 400 magic number for cast reduction that I wanted. Now I am pairing that with a healing power Trust Stone, and I think that will definitely be useful for that healing skill that we looked at, but it will also be useful for the drain effect on her limit burst. And of course, any heals coming in from Lemure or another support unit would be amplified on top of that. To round out the offensive side here on the right, I'm filling in some passives that weren't covered in that book weapon that we looked at. So I'm taking a magic boost, a spirit penetration, dark attack, and dexterity. And I'm tying all of these into that agility set. I think that one is just universally valuable for pretty much any unit in the game. And as this is more of an auto-centric build that I've put together here, I have opted not to use Thief's Lore for the added agility and movement. So in that case, she definitely could use this extra agility. So that is the build, guys, and I think it actually will be a pretty good one. One thing that I actually didn't mention about this, though, is it does fit into that 250 unit cost plateau. So definitely will be very nice for limited costs, and including the limited guild war that we have coming up in just a few days. As always, I will go ahead and put a link to this one in the description, so definitely check that out as well if you want to get a closer look. So what is my verdict here on Halloween Lucia? She really has a lot of tools that are just going to make her a solid frontline unit against any physical damage. She's going to have pretty good hit points, good defense. She has that protect status, that huge 7,500 HP barrier. I think that her skills are bringing in some nice utility to help add on to that as well. She has that attack magic break, the defense penetration reduction in that big AoE, and then of course that drain effect on her limit burst that will help top her off and keep her sustained in battle. I think all of this is going to stack up to making her a very capable, frontline physical bruiser, and I think that she'll have some pretty nice magical damage to back it up. Now on top of these things, she is bringing that follow-up attack on her limit burst, which can be very effective for dealing with courage and re-raise effects. And hide your win teams, guys, because if she does manage to kill an enemy with that large diamond AoE, it will actually count as 2 kills, once for the initial kill and then again for the re-raise. So she would be getting that CT bonus twice on just that one unit, and that will total up to 40 CT, which will be quite crazy. Now on the other side of the coin, in terms of my concerns here, this unit will definitely be exposed against magical damage. She doesn't have any natural spirit or magic resistance to help her out in that area, so she'll be relying on her hit points and area resistance alone to sort of bulk her up there. If she were to take fatal damage, she doesn't have a mortal spirit or a re-raise of her own, or even something like reflex to fall back on and bail her out. Maybe could be a good candidate for Halloween Ryryu's Timar though, if you're able to grab it. On top of that, her overall stats and, especially her accuracy and magic resist penetration are very lackluster. She does have those 2 guaranteed hits that we looked at, which will definitely help her out significantly, but a couple of her most powerful attacks, including that diamond AoE and her limit burst, will be nigh unusable against maximum evade units, unless you're investing heavily into her accuracy. Now thankfully the dark element does have many tools to be able to do just that, so if you did want to go that direction, the potential is definitely there. At the end of the day though, this is a 70 cost unit. We really never seen them. It has definitely been a while. And this unit is instantly going to become one of the most powerful 70 costers in the game. So really is going to make her well suited to slide right into those dark limited cost parties. And I'd say effective low cost dark units is definitely one of the areas that element has struggled in the most. On top of the limited benefits, Gumi really is pulling at the PvE heartstrings here with this release. As we talked a little bit about earlier, the TMR and the vision card both are really, I think, going to be invaluable for that type of play. All right, guys, so that is my look into Halloween Lucia. Gumi seems to be going back to that 70 cost well, really after not touching it for a couple of years. We actually did see another 70 coster recently on the Japanese side, and that was Charisse, which was a 70 cost wind unit. As long as Gumi continues to invest into limited content and features, things like limited guild war and especially class match, I personally am definitely a fan of these lower cost units, and I think they represent some nice build path options if you want to go for them. As I said though, definitely some big FOMO potential with this unit and vision card. And I definitely want to urge people out there, be responsible, pull within your means. It is very easy to sort of fall into that trap and thinking that you absolutely need something when actually maybe you don't. That is definitely always a dangerous place to be. So I would just say, remember that there is always going to be a new vision card, always going to be a new powerful unit, just around the corner. So put your sights on that, if maybe you're not in a position to pull for this unit right now. For those that do decide to pull, I think there is nice value in this unit, particularly for low cost play. I think most of us, do actually like seeing the alternate versions of favorite characters as well. And I think they have really done a tasteful job here on this one. So what are you guys thinking out there? Are you pulling? Are you skipping? Are you grabbing the card, only maybe? Definitely let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video today, hit that like button. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And that's really all I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.